How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Good night. There we go.
I had initially found a post on the Genius Network where you were speaking at the front of the room, and I was super intrigued. So I started to kind of look into you, checking out your website, which I read all the way through, and I thought, okay, who is this guy? I'm very curious. So I
So it
really,
works.
yeah, I think it works for certain people, perhaps.
The right people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I had mentioned to you yesterday that I was reading your book Bumpers, which I would love to chat about today.
Mhm.
So, Nick, maybe we can just start off with you just telling me a little bit about yourself and your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. That's a tough one. People always ask. One, I am one of the few entrepreneurs types that doesn't like to talk about myself.
Okay,
Um,
fair enough.
and so people ask, what do you do? It's the same question Joe Polish asked at his genius event. And we had this conversation. And it's like it depends on the day.
Yeah.
And so my entrepreneurial journey was one, I think like everybody else, I just have an issue with authority. But I get stuck on stuff. Like I get interested in something
Yeah.
and I obsess over it like crazy. And so the first thing, my first entrepreneurial venture was on my 21st birthday, I opened a gym.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had no interest in running a business. I didn't even think of it like running a business. I just wanted to be in the gym all the time.
You like working out.
I did, yeah. That was like my thing. I just wanted to be like the strongest human to ever live. And those are the phases I go through. Like I just want to be the best in the world. And I got very close. Uh and then so because I got really good at powerlifting and strongman and stuff, people would come from all over and want to train. And they were paying like $30 a month. Um
Okay.
and at one point I had torn both my hamstrings, I tore both my pecs, I tore my left adductor. I was like crippling myself. And I was sitting in my gym, which was just a bunch of dudes that wanted to be strong at the time. And I was like, I don't want to be strong anymore. And it just popped in my mind, like maybe I should learn how to make money. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to learn how to make money. And so over the next couple of years, my gym we ended up knocking down 7 walls. So we started in like one little bay, and we just, as soon as I said I want to learn how to make money,
Yeah.
I got really good at making money. So knocked down all those walls from there, launched a nutrition company, sold both the gym and the nutrition company. They are both still active.
Okay.
And then I didn't mean to, got into like business coaching, started the mastermind, had 44 people join like the month that I started it. And it was crazy. Uh, and it was like, I've never really, here's what I'll tell you. And I've just done that over and over. Like, I'm interested in this. I obsess over it. I get good enough at it that other people see it and they want to learn how to do it. Um, but it was a blessing to me, and this is what Bumpers is about, that I started in fitness and I had very smart friends.
Mm.
Because what you learn in the thing about fitness that uh and I think I mentioned it in Bumpers as well, is you can't hide from reality. Like you can either squat 600 pounds or you can't. You can't say that you do and not. So like a fitness journey, a true physical journey, uh, it breaks the delusion about who you are versus who you think you are, and how you behave versus how you think you behave. Uh, and so the reason I was able to do really good in strongman and powerlifting, all that stuff, is because I realized that gap between who I believe I am and who I actually am. And in ever since, that has been like the superpower, the secret sauce that I bring with me to things.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, why can't I market? Why can't I make sales? Why can't I do this? And it actually has nothing to do with the tactics.
Yeah.
It's that you're not being honest about how you behave and who you are.
Mhm.
And that's what I do. I just, you know, the tactics are the same. There's
Yeah.
a few ways to market, a few ways to sell, there's a few ways to fulfill, there's a few ways to all that stuff. Uh, so my journey since has just been, it started with like where I got in the business. Um, if you help business owners, successful business owners, they'll pay you more for the same work. So
Mm.
that's kind, like uh, if you fix if you modify the behavior of somebody doing $40 million a year, they make significantly more and they're happy to pay some. Whereas if you modify the behavior of somebody on minimum wage, they're better off, but they didn't make significantly more, so they don't have more to pay you. So that's why I got in the business. And then when money became less of a thing, and I'm in the middle of this right now, is I'm really racking my brain trying to figure out, okay, so I have this skill. How do I help the most people?
Yes.
And that will be my next kind of journeys, is not worried about who's going to pay me the most, but where's the biggest lever? How do we remove the most suffering from the most amount of people?
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that's a tough one.
it is. But it sounds like you're, aside from the money and opportunity, it seems like you're kind of turning into like, where can I make the most impact?
Mhm.
Would that sound fair?
Yeah.
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 And it's really interesting because I had read your book and yeah, you're a very curious person, which is really nice actually, because you're always following what you're interested in. And when I think about like people that I've coached on mindset, sometimes people are doing things that they actually don't want to be doing, but they're still doing them.
Mhm.
And I think that you have a famous quote that you had in your book. I don't know if I've memorized it, but it goes something to the effect of like, it's about misery and uncertainty.
Yeah. So
It's
I'll
such a good one.
I'll share that with you, and I'll tell you why it's so important to me, because it's like
Yeah,
a fundamental truth that some people don't want to accept.
yeah,
The quote is from Virginia Satir,
right.
and it is, most prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty,
Yes.
which means if you had door number one, you are guaranteed to stay in your shitty situation. Door number two, there's a 5% chance of happiness, but we don't know what it's going to look like. Logically, anybody would pick a 5% chance of happiness over a 0% chance of happiness. But practically, in reality,
Doesn't happen.
everybody chooses the devil they know.
Uh,
And the reason that quote sticks with me is when I was first trying to I figured out my own nutritional stuff. And I have kind of a militant, I'm uh, hyper compliant. Like,
hyper.
I'm going to, yeah, if I decide I'm going to do something, I do it.
Yes.
And we'd worked with, like, at the time, almost 3,000 people, and they are not hyper compliant. So we're thinking, like, why can't we get them to change their behavior? And we looked everywhere. And then my business partner at the time, a brilliant guy, he got his PhD when he was 23. He
Uh,
started digging into like pediatric psychologists, like, you know, uh, psychologists for children, and all the answers were there. So Virginia Satir is a pediatric psychologist. And what I realized is that we're all giant children. We're just oversized children. And so, yeah, most of the best stuff, the most like fundamentally true things that I've found come from books about uh, dealing with kids.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth in what you say. Also, because sometimes we're just not clear on what it is that we even want in the first place. So
Mhm.
we're kind of firing in all directions with no clear target. So it's hard to hit that target when you haven't actually established one, and then you get pulled in many different directions. But going back to the misery of certainty, like, yeah, I remember having put a post out just saying that we're getting way too comfortable in remaining uncomfortable. Like sometimes it's the devil that but then how do we get people to really just turn on that switch to say, what, that's it. I'm ready for something else. And I know, like, for me personally, I think it was like, when the pain of actually not changing is greater than the pain of just experiencing the change. I think, like, when you kind of just go too far and you realize, what, it's actually not as advantageous to stay in the situation than it is to just figure out something new or different and just go into it not knowing. I think that for me, like, that's kind of when I say, what, no, I'm not going to stay in this, even though I know it. I know I don't like it. So that's how I kind of tend to make my changes. But I really like that whole, like, the gap and using bumpers, like the bumpers itself, the whole idea of bumpers. Maybe you can go a little bit into what bumpers is, because I have a lot of, like I read your book and I thought, wow, this is actually very, very good, because we don't live life thinking about our bumpers at all.
No, we're and I appreciate that. I rewrote the whole thing a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, you got the new version.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so bumpers is I woke up in the middle of the night and something was bothering me, which was people kept saying, "How do you do so many different things?
Yeah.
So many different industries, all these different partners?" And it's like I couldn't explain to them that I don't do so many different things. And I woke up, it was like 3 a.m. and it hit me. And I was like, I think this is what I do. And so I went and I wrote bumpers. And it was ultimately uh, when you work with people that are ambitious, and that's a big caveat. So you've read it, bumpers is not going to motivate you to get up and do something. It is written for people that are already in motion.
That's true. Yes.
It's not hoorah, like I was in a car accident and epiphany and motivation. It's like, look, you're already in motion. And those are the people I partner with. And all it is point out, like, hey, look, you're about to like ride your bike off a cliff. So like slow down. Don't go that way.
Mhm.
So super driven people, they don't need motivation. They just need they've made the mistake of the need for speed, right? Like they want to feel like they're moving fast.
Mhm.
And in their life, many times they have felt like they're moving fast and they've gotten to where they're going. The problem with feeling like you're moving fast is there's no vector component, there's no direction, right? So you can move fast in a big circle or right off of the edge of a cliff or into a brick wall.
Mhm.
And so it was like, hey, these people are going to move. We actually need to get them to move, not even in exactly the right direction. It's just like avoid these things. And if you are one of those people that gets up and moves, if you just avoid, and it's called bumpers because like bumpers in the bowling alley, you just avoid the gutter, you're going to get there. That's all like for
Yeah.
many of these people, it's like they were working and working and working. They were getting so close. And then I start working with them and they reach all their goals and I get a whole bunch of credit.
Mhm.
But before, they just kept blowing themselves up and having to start over.
Right.
We're spending 6 months going in the wrong direction before realizing it. And then they had to take 6 months to get back to where they were. And so it was just eliminating the bad things. So bumpers is appreciate when bad things don't happen. And there's some frameworks in there to do that. Um, but it's really, the concept is really, if you can just not go backwards,
Yeah.
you're going to get there because you wake up and you move. So again, if somebody's listening and they need motivation, don't read bumpers. It's not going to motivate you.
But it will give perspective, like setting up some guardrails to your life. What I saw in terms of bumpers was like, bumpers will help you solidify perhaps, and you can tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but I thought, we have our beliefs, we have our values, we have our identity in terms of who we think we are. And then when you have bumpers, those are like your guard rails, and they're like your non-negotiables. So if this is if this is what you value, then what's your non-negotiable that aligns with that value that you have, or that belief that you have? What do you think about that? That's sort of what I was thinking when I was reading your book.
It is. I mean, you nailed it. And what's difficult for me, I'm a better doer than a teacher, so I can do it. It's going to take me years before I can explain what I'm doing. And so I haven't figured this out yet, how to articulate this. I tried in the video that I know you watched, like the circumnavigation piece, is it's iterative. So without fail, you're going to say, these are my non-negotiables because this is who I am. And you are going to go and you're going to violate your non-negotiables, which means either that's not really a non-negotiable or it's not really who you are. No judgment, right?
Yeah.
But so it's iterative. It's going to take many, many, many tries. And we're just, most of the time, we're not honest about who we are. But there's often times where we're not honest about what we want. Like, I'll just use a random example. You know, I will never not show up for one of my kids' sports games, you know,
Mhm.
because you think that's what you're supposed to say. But if we're really honest with yourself, you don't give a shit if you're there.
Right.
And like, just be honest. That's okay. And so it's just this process of getting to who you really are and what do you really believe. And most, you know, this probably way better than I do, but in my experience, most of the beliefs that we espouse are actually what we think we're supposed to say. It's not what we actually believe. So by putting, it's almost like, you know, the game Operation. It's like your bumpers like little buzzers where it's like, bzz, like it's just a warning that, hey, there's something off between your espoused values and your behavior. I'm not saying you have to change your behavior. It's okay to change your espoused values, uh, which people, you know, the consistency bias, they want to stay consistent with something they said in the past. And so it's just consistently like peeling these things away. And again, the right people, they just start living more aligned with who they are. And when you do that, you start winning more.
Absolutely, yes, 100%. Yeah, I agree. I think that, we've got these stories that we tell ourselves, and, some stories we tell ourselves, some stories have been told to us, and we've come to take them as our own beliefs. And we are always trying to stay congruent with who we think we are. So making those changes can be difficult. And I think that, step one is self-awareness. Like, are you really willing to stop and be real with yourself, and really like discern whether that thought or that belief is yours, or it was one that you just adopted through childhood, through friends, through culture, religion, whatever it may be. And I find like with my clients, I find like people really have a hard time accepting that something they've been living for the last, 20, 30, 40 years is really not what they want. But the minute they're able to kind of break through, like, okay, you know what, that's not me. No, that's like, like it's really embracing who your true authentic self actually is. Because I think that's how you win in life. The more you show who you are, who you actually are, the more you're going to start attracting people that are resonating and aligning with, with you, your thoughts, your behaviors, your thinking, your values. But the more we hide ourselves and not peel back those layers, the more we stay in situations where we're surrounded by people that we know deep down we shouldn't probably be surrounded by.
Yeah. You know, it gets the risk with people that are driven is that they will build a fake version of themselves and they will surround them. And as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to break free because you have more to lose. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have all these friends that you don't really jive with anyway. But the
Correct.
more friends you have, the harder it is to
Yeah.
change because you have more to lose.
You're right. Yeah, it's hard to break those ties. But you know what else I've found, Nick, is that people achieve a certain level of success. And when they get there, they really don't feel like it gave them the feeling that they thought it was going to give them.
Mhm.
And there's people that'll take a step back and really reflect on their life. And what I've noticed, like even just looking in the personal development world, a lot of the ultra successful people are really at a stage in their life where they're thinking about, impact, meaning, contribution the things that make their soul rich, the things that make their spirit rich. And I think that people are really finding that it's not about getting, it's about giving. Have
Yeah.
you
I've,
experienced
I've,
that in circles?
I don't have this in my, it's not in bumpers, but about 2 years ago, and I don't know if this video will be shared, but this little pendant
Well,
here,
yeah.
and behind me, I got a flute and a sword. And this is because I went on a journey. And about 2 years ago, I started this journey, and it's a 4,200-year-old lineage, and the underpinning is live to learn, give to earn.
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
it's live to learn first. Like, don't just know stuff, do stuff.
Yes.
Right? If you can't do it, you're not it. So it's like become it. And what that means is first remove suffering from yourself. It's kind of like
Yeah.
Cartman's triangle. If you're familiar with Cartman's triangle, it's like don't go rescue other people. Like the biggest benefit you have on the world is remove suffering from yourself. Because when you remove suffering from yourself, you stop causing suffering for other people. And so it's a net positive. And so don't help anybody else till you've helped yourself. But once you've helped yourself, which is the best thing you can do for everybody around you, by the way,
Yes.
ignoring your own stuff and trying to help them is just going to make everything worse. So live to learn, and then that's one. Remove suffering from yourself, and then what they say is your life plan should exceed your lifespan. It becomes really about now giving what you have learned. So you have to learn it first. You have to live it to learn it, not know it, memorize it. And then just by doing that, you stop suffering, you stop creating suffering for others, and you become a light. You become proof that it can be done. And then the natural thing is to want to help others. And so there's this transition. And for those of you that listening, and for you too, um, the biggest thing about the whole live to learn, give to earn, and the whole you know thing that I'm doing is it's Taoist, and they have a really interesting take on stuff. So you used to grow up in like an ashram and you owned nothing, and they gave you a robe. It wasn't your robe, it was the robe they let you wear. And the point was you need to learn how to live without things.
Yes.
But it's 2023. That's not the new struggle is we have things and we have to learn how to live with them. So
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
actually harder to learn to live with things and not let them own you than it is to grow up without things. Uh, and so the whole thing is like, because of the world we live in, we see the Ferraris, we see the Instagram posts, all that stuff. Um, Part of the live to learn is if you have material desires, right? You should acquire them. You should. Uh, because if you don't, if you're like, oh, I don't need stuff, when you're 90 years old and you have regret,
Mhm.
like you're taking that with you. You're not going to be peaceful. So it's like acquire the stuff and then learn, like you have it. Don't tell yourself you don't need it, because you may not believe yourself. Acquire the thing and then learn how to live with it and without it. And so it's a really interesting perspective, because it's like when you're young, acquire all the things.
Yeah.
And then at a certain age, you can give them away if you want, but the giving is really, it's not giving stuff. It's like
Yeah.
helping people remove suffering from themselves. So it's a, yeah,
Wow.
the whole legacy and posterity and all that has been it has become more top of mind for me in the last 2 years.
Yeah. So would you say that you're kind of in that second phase of,
uh,
or are you always going to be in both?
well, I'm closer to the second phase. So there's a reality of, and I don't want to trigger anybody, I'm just going to tell you my opinion is, if I'm 33. So if you're 33 and you're like, I don't need stuff, and you go live on the beach, and you're like, I'm just here to help, and you help, one, you're not really helping that many people.
Mhm.
And two, you're full of it, because what you're talking about, like these spiritual vagrants living on the beach, they're talking about the world of formlessness. And if you can't master the world of form, you
Mhm.
are not going to figure out the world of formlessness. So there is some level of ongoing mastering the world of form. Like you have to keep boots on the ground, acquiring things, building things. You do whatever the hell you want with the money. But there's like some level of, I still need to be able to provide value to the world and make money. And it's also very expensive to help a lot of people.
That's true. Yeah.
So there'll always be a foot in the acquiring, even if it's being acquired to be given away. And there's another bit that's like, I'm 33. And one of the mistakes that you can make is that, like, I think about 30s to 40s, it's really not to like mid 50s or 60s that you're in that legacy phase. So it might be different for everybody. There's a lot of wiggle room. But I do know that jumping phases too soon,
Mhm.
like there's a lot of work to be done between now and then that I'm unaware of. Uh, so I will, I'm tinkering with the giving phase, but
Yeah.
it's really about I'm still very heavy in acquiring platforms in which to help people, acquiring properties which we can have people come do stuff on, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's beautiful. I know I read in your book, like, what does your perfect day look like? Like helping people really even just understand what is a perfect day. So I actually was curious to know, what's Nick's perfect day?
So I have a confession.
Okay.
uh, my brain is, something's wrong with my brain. So I'm super cyclic. I will have times in my life where I just do nothing, and I'll have times where I was here at like 3:30 this morning. But I know that about myself. And so Bumpers was written after working with we had about 3,000 people come through the nutrition company, worked with them. We have all their data, worked with them one-on-one, what my team did. And so Bumpers was written for what is the most useful for like 90% of people. It's actually like 96% of people.
Okay.
I'm like the 4% that just whatever. I just go, and my day tomorrow might look different than today, and I'm happy with either. Uh, so
Okay.
yeah, that part, it most I'll just share this because there may be listeners that benefit. You may benefit or get some perspective or questions. Most people, and this is totally normal, most people still need something to aspire to in order to start modifying their behavior. So perfect day, and then we kind of back into our bumpers, and what we're really doing is we're modifying our behavior
Mhm.
for a more favorable outcome, for something that is more like perfect to us than what we're doing now. um I just modify my behavior. It's like, I kind of want to like behave this way now, and that's not like a typical thing for people to do. So we got to give them a something out here to aspire to, and then back into how to modify their behavior. And without fail, whatever they want today, whatever they think they want 10 years from now, it'll be different. you
Yes,
know
it will.
so it's
Yeah.
really just to give them some direction, totally understanding that their priorities will change, their obligations will change.
Exactly. Like what we want today is not what we're going to want 5 years from now, because life is changing, we're changing, right? And I love the whole idea of like, if you want to close that gap, you have to look at your behavior. Is what you're saying you want to do and what you're actually doing, is it the same, or are we saying something and doing something different? And I think in coaching, I think that's where a lot of struggle is, I think, with coaches, because it's like, okay, clients want this. These are the results clients are after. But then you check in on that weekly or bi-weekly basis, and they haven't really done the work to get them closer to their goals.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's two sides of that. And this is why I can't sell, like, all my business stuff is one-on-one. It's custom. Because I can't sell this cookie cutter stuff, because it's not like, sometimes the behavior has to change. Sometimes the plan has to change.
Yeah.
Sometimes they both have to change a little bit and meet in the middle. So, somebody says, yeah, I want these results. We say, okay, well, to get that, you have to do this. In my opinion, a really good coach is going to say, hey, given your behavior now and what you say you want in 3 years, you should probably extend that out to like 7 years, because then there's a high probability that we can get there.
Yes.
So we might change the goal. We might change, the $10 million in 6 months. It's probably not going to happen. Right. But if we expand the time horizon, and, you're not good at sales calls, but you love doing this, well, we can implement this and it might change it. And so it's a multivariable equation. And in a multivariable equation, when you change one variable, you got to change all the others. So yeah, behavior, but I don't think pathologizing people or demanding more rigid behavior is super helpful. It's helpful to the people that were in the military and made it through. But the more rigid, it's that's what yo-yo dieting is. It's like, okay, my behavior is horrible and I need to change it. And so you go super strict, and you get so strict that what do? You rebel against yourself. And then, yeah, you actually end up in the same place or worse. And then because you're in the same place or worse, you get even stricter next time, and you vacillate between chaos and rigidity. And that's what happens when the plan is too far disconnected from your actual behavior. And so how do we stop yo-yo dieting, which we do in all areas of our life? We modify the plan. We do it less rigid, so we are less likely to rebel against our own tyranny, so that we have progress and we accumulate wins, and, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. It reminds me of that story in your book where you were talking about you had a coach, and the coach told you to drink like a gallon of water a day for a week and then call him. Mm-hmm. And then you drank you did it five of the 7 days. And he said, you know what, call me when you've done it for 7. And it's true. It's like, we think that, well, we did better than the start. We didn't reach the target, but we did better than the starting point. And we think for some reason, that's good, right? Not realizing that it's actually not, because you haven't even reached that foundation before you can even build upon the next step. But we just don't function that way.
Well, think about this. I call this the adaptive dilemma, and I geeked out about it last year, which is, if somebody is on a diet, and I tend to use nutrition because everybody has struggled with it or knows somebody that has. If you're on a diet and you're like, hey, I'm supposed to do this 7 days a week, but I did, every day of the week. It's just the weekend, not a big deal. 5 out of 7 is pretty good. Well, 5 out of 7, which I think I use this example in my book. 5 out of 7 is 71%. Okay. And so your behavior is 71% of what it's supposed to be. If your Google Maps only got your location correct 71% of the time, you would be furious, because that's not acceptable.
Correct.
If your computer only turned on or your Wi-Fi only works 71% of the time, it would not be acceptable. So if 71% is not acceptable in anything that you expect to get results with, then your behavior at 71% is not acceptable. And we never, so the adaptive dilemma is the concept that we look at the tech, we're like, yeah, crypto, Bitcoin's going to fix this. It's like, it's not, because you're going to behave the same.
Yeah.
AI is going to fix this. It's not, because you're going to behave the same. The tech is almost, your computer turns on 99.999% of the time. Like, all the tech in the world today is nearly perfect.
It's us.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
behavior, your behavior relative to the plan is always the least reliable component.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think sometimes we just have unrealistic expectations, or we don't expect that we need to work as hard to get those results. But in reality, it's always harder, right? It's always harder to take that mirror and reflect it back to ourselves. It's always easier to look out the window.
Mhm.
It's not as easy to look back within and say, what is my role in this? Where am I not holding myself accountable?
I'll give you an example,
Yeah.
because this one triggers people. And, like, I'll tell you this. I did not put this in the book, I don't think. What I do really, really well is I hold up a mirror to people.
Mhm.
And so the benefit is brilliant people, when you hold up a mirror, everybody thinks it's a window, right? So the most brilliant people I know all think I'm really smart. I'm not. They just don't know that it's, they're looking at the window. And some of the most incompetent people I've ever met think I'm incompetent because they think it's a window. And so, fun fact, if you want people to think you're smart, if you want smart people to think you're smart, just reflect back to them. Just reflect themselves back. They'll give you credit. So adapted to an example of how we do this to ourselves. If you say Oreos make me fat, people say it all the time, Oreos make me fat, and it seems harmless, right? You are implying that the Oreos snuck into your apartment, held you down, and shoved themselves down your throat against your will, right? But they didn't. So anytime I catch myself, or what I recommend is you go, Bitcoin wrecked me.
Yeah,
Well, that implies that you were walking down the street and a giant Bitcoin just came out of nowhere and rolled over you. No,
exactly.
you don't have great self-control, so you don't keep Oreos in the house because you can't eat just one. That's okay, but that's a more useful, like, you're acknowledging your role in it, right? I did not have a proper time preference for Bitcoin. I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I lost money, right? That you're acknowledging your role in it.
Mhm.
So you can listen to people's language and they say, oh yeah, Oreos make me fat. No, they don't.
Yeah.
No, your lack of self-control means that you eat all the Oreos, and
Yeah.
that probably adds to your waistline a little bit, and that's okay.
Correct. And
So,
that goes with a lot of things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I say, so we villainize things, we just
Exactly. Yeah.
villainize everything but our role in the whole situation.
And that's a problem because, when someone adopts that victim mentality or that victim mindset, you basically just give away all your power, right? Like you're saying things are happening to you, everything is happening to you. And then, you can't really take a step back and say, okay, where can I take responsibility? Because once I take responsibility, I can actually change my behavior or change my thinking, change my actions. We have the power to change. Do we want to actually go there, and accept that, even with relationships, people, business, business dealings gone bad, family relationships gone, whatever it may be. It's like, what was my role in this? And what can I do about it? Because if you remain in that victim mentality, like you're not going anywhere. You're going nowhere fast.
Yeah. There's that's a tricky one. Certain people get it, in my experience anyway, because there are absolutely times where objectively we could say, yeah, you got screwed. But even then, the it could be valid.
Mhm.
It's not useful, right? So it's like we're always thinking, is that valid or is that useful?
Right.
Even then, the only useful perspective, the only useful question to ask is what was my role?
Yeah.
Like, it's not saying just, because people also get triggered when it's like take responsibility for your role in it. And it's not to say that we're discounting all of these unfortunate things that happened. Just saying that if you take the role of a victim, you will forever be in the role of a victim. So that it can it can be out of your control. You still, in my opinion, you still want to say, okay, well, how did I contribute to this?
Absolutely. And if it's not useful and it's not helping you move forward in your life or closer to your goals or results, then it's time to just say, you did the best you could with what you had, or, the situation was inevitable and we move forward. Like we take the lessons, we take the learnings, we apply it in our next, business dealing, relationship, whatever it may be. Like extract from it what you can in terms of what will actually ultimately benefit you now or in the future.
Let I'll share I probably won't write another book. Ben Hardy.
Of course.
Ben Hardy and but Ben talked about writing a trilogy for me.
Oh.
Um, so we'll see if that happens. But here's a bit that I sent to him, which is the whole victim mentality thing. It gets really confusing because we're so outcome focused,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And remember, a bad decision can have a good outcome,
That's true.
right? Like, oh, cool, it cost you $1 to play a game with 83% chance of winning and you won $1 million.
Yeah.
That's a good decision, except if that game was Russian roulette, it's actually a pretty stupid decision still.
Yeah.
So it's important to in my mind to realize that uh let's say you and your brother take over the family business and you're like, yeah, I see a path forward, and it's a restaurant. So you buy him out and he buys Dogecoin.
Mhm.
Okay. Given all of the information at that time, you probably made the best decision. But then COVID hit. And Elon Musk mentioned Dogecoin, and now he looks smart, and you start doubting, right, your own decision making process. You're still the better decision maker. There's this thing called luck and randomness that
Correct.
is always happening. So a good decision can have a bad outcome, and a really stupid ass decision can have a good outcome.
Yeah.
And so when we say what was my role in this, it's really examining the logic, the reasoning, and the evidence that went into your behavior, not the outcome.
That's true.
And that's where, and I see so many people get spun out because they make the right decision, given all the evidence, they make the right decision. Somebody else made a really stupid decision, but the outcomes were reversed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so, acknowledge my role in this. You may have actually done everything correctly and still had a bad outcome.
You
And
know, I, yeah, and you're right. And I think that sometimes you go back and regret a decision, even though at that moment in time, in that snapshot with all the information you had, that was the right decision. But then when we're looking back, we're judging that decision in that point in time with today's information, with what we know today. And then we tend to judge ourselves or say that, what, we did make the wrong decision, but you couldn't have known. Like you said, sometimes it's luck, right? Sometimes it's timing. We can't always control everything around us, right? There's always going to be variables.
you're the most and kind of, I don't even know if this is on topic or not, but the most the thing that messes with most people the most, including me, is understanding that there are no certainties. Right?
Yeah.
That's one. And our brain loves certainties. Like, please promise us something. There are no certainties. So being dogmatic is not super useful. Absolutes and certainties do not exist. it's all probabilities and risks.
Mhm.
It's all a guess. And we're just trying to like do some expected value or figure out probabilities. The wild thing is that throughout, what's the probability that XYZ happens at any moment in time? The most probable outcome is almost never the one that actually happens. And so it's like, how the hell do we get a handle on on the world?
Yeah.
It's iteration. It's just doing the best you can with what you have, and then judging yourself based on your behavior given the logic, reason, evidence at the time, and trying, understanding that, okay, examine the process, not the outcome, because the outcome is random as hell.
That's so good. Examine the process. And it speaks to the whole thing with personal development, which is like, love the process, not the outcome. Work in the process. Work on getting better each day than the day before. And you're right. We can control or have more certainty in the process and the iteration of that process than to be able to have certainty in the outcome, because you're right, it's almost never it's not always what you think it's going to be. I want to talk to you about this part in your book that I really liked because it resonated so much. And you said sometimes the best action is non-action, do nothing. And you had brought in the example of I believe it was when you hurt your back. Am I right?
I used a back example. Yeah.
Or okay, it wasn't, but okay, it was just an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked it because recently my son had an accident, and it was like just minutes before I was going to get them in the car and drive to New York City to head on a cruise. And I find him face down in the street, like not responsive. So it was just such a crazy, crazy day. We rushed him to the hospital, and and he had this massive cut right under his nose. Like I don't even want to talk about it. It was not pretty. And it was like, the doctors were like, we need plastics in here to fix this. We need plastics. We can't fix this. Plastics needs to do it. And we're kind of freaking out. He's freaking out. He wants to go on vacation. We've delayed our vacation. And I call up a friend who's a plastic surgeon. And he's like, I show him a video, pictures, and he says, no, do nothing. Let them stitch it up. They're ER doctors. Let them stitch it up, send them home. And if he wants to go on vacation, take him. I'm like, oh my God, and like every part of me was like, literally, that's the least amount of thing that I can do is like just have ER doctors who aren't even comfortable stitching them up and send them home. And I was freaking like, what do? I think what they're saying makes sense. Have, the people who are specialized in this type of, trauma and injury deal with the situation. But it would have meant like everybody misses the vacation, and he's very upset. And it was the hardest decision to listen to him. Don't do anything. Let them do their thing, send them home, and it just made sense that a plastic surgeon can take a look and fix it better. And, so like when you said, like, sometimes the best action is non-action, I thought, wow, that's the first thing I thought about. And that's really hard to do for humans.
Incredibly difficult. There's the people that the people that generally, in my experience, that care about you the most are your spouses and whatever. Have you ever seen like a sitcom or something where one of them's freaking out and the other one's like sitting in the lazy boy, like, just calm down, just chill? It's like that's what people actually care about you.
Yeah.
If they know you well enough that they understand that it's like, just do nothing, like,
Yeah.
allow some space. And then it's strangers that always come in and offer to do some heroic action, which actually introduces a ton more risk. So for people in general, it's hard because we love the hero. We love when somebody saves the day. We need to feel productive. As a parent, I'm not a parent, so I've worked with a lot of them. It's like you want to do everything you can for your kids, and like the key word is do. Like, if I'm not being active, then I'm not. And it's like, doing the right thing. But it's like, say, sometimes the right thing is to do nothing.
Yeah.
And for driven people, Dr. Jeff Spencer is one of my best friends. I spent a lot of time with him. He was he coached all 9 Tour de France victories, mindset and performance coach. Travels with Bono and U2 and Tiger Woods and Richard Branson. He's brilliant.
Okay.
And one of the very first things he said to me is, you know what the key word in the champion's vocabulary is? I
Yeah.
said, no, what is it? He said, it's restraint.
Oh,
It's restraint. It's not doing something when your human mindset, every impulse is saying, I need to do something. It's you figure out restraint and you can accomplish anything. And it's a version of understanding that our impulses are going to bias doing something. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it or experienced it where it's like, I got to do something. Like it's almost like that impulse when you think you're arguing with your spouse and you're like, I got this really good thing to say. It's gonna be really good. And then you say it and you're like, oh, that was not good. Yeah. Like that's our human impulse, which is like, do the thing, say the thing,
yeah.
have the last word. And it's a system 2. It's our what Dr. Jekyll calls our champion's mind that says, no, just do nothing.
Nothing.
I know
Yeah.
everything in you says you got to do this thing, but just do nothing. And that's hard. It's very hard for people.
It is. It is. And, because it's so easy to be in the mode of the doing, it's actually very difficult to be in the mode of the being, right? Like how can you just be, or like restrained? How can you hold back? Yeah, we're programmed, especially high achievers are very programmed to do, to go, to create, to achieve. So it's a total mind shift to go in the opposite direction.
It is. It can be trained though. It can be
Yes.
through experience, and also if you learn how to see risk, or you learn how to see asymmetry and leverage, it'll slow you down because you'll be able to see that, like, oh, doing all this stuff is super inefficient. I can actually just wait and then pull this lever and I'll get more done. But you still have to give yourself enough space to discern the risk, adjust for the risk, and observe the potential asymmetry.
Yeah. It's funny, Nick, you say you're not a good teacher, but when I read the book, it was so clear. Like you're teaching it takes out all the fluff. Like there's no fluff in your book. It's thin because there's no fluff, right? You're not, okay, well, when is the point coming? You're not thinking that. Like I'm reading and I'm writing. I'm reading and I'm like, okay, there's so much to write because it's all like there's a lot of important points, graphs, ideas, concepts, and it's a lot of stuff that I think like most people probably don't really think in those ways. I think that's what makes this book really unique, is that we don't really question the things that you question. And I think that comes to your curiosity. It takes you places that it doesn't take most people.
Yeah, it does. And I have
Yeah.
a bunch of brilliant people have held up a mirror to me and helped me understand myself a little bit. When I say I'm not a good teacher, what I actually mean is I'm not a performer, you know?
Okay.
And
Okay.
so you've seen some of my YouTube videos. Like I'm just going to talk like this. And so if I'm in a dialogue, I tend to do really well if I'm doing Q&A, but I can't show up and present. I'm
Yes.
just not going to do it.
I think, yeah, that's very clear. You don't present. I think you kind of show up just as yourself, and you download what's on your mind. And I think at the end of the day, the responsibility is on the listener on whether or not it lands. It's on them.
So what I try to do, just to your point about the book being simple, my style
Yeah.
is, and it comes from this belief that I have, which is like, if you tell me if you're trying to convince me that you are worth $1 million,
Mhm.
the more graphs and pages and the harder you try to prove it, the less I believe you.
Yes.
Just show me $1 million in your bank account. And so when it comes to writing and stuff, it's like, even though I don't I might think about things that people don't think about. My hope is that when I say it and they hear it, it's so self-evident that it
Yes.
doesn't require a ton of charts and graphs. That
Explanation.
tells me that we hit like a first principle, a fundamental truth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my style. Is like I want to be able to articulate it so it's self-evident as soon as somebody hears it. And that doesn't, I'm not going to put any more words than that.
No, that's good. It kind of just it cuts through the noise. I think that's what's nice about the book is that like it just gets right to the point. It cuts through the noise and it's logical. It makes sense. Like you can see yourself in that book. You bring up examples and concepts, but probably the reader can come up with their own examples of how, the concepts actually ring true. So I think you had said something in the book, like, if this book is simple, or if this is simple, it is, but, if I was smarter, it would be simpler. Just
Mhm.
started laughing. Yeah, I probably butchered what you said, but it was hilarious. I thought again, another one of those, like quotes that just rings true, right? Like the complexity is easy for anyone can make anything complex. It takes someone very intelligent to make it simple and easy to understand and digest.
I think it takes intelligence, maybe. I don't know that I'm super high on the intelligence scale, IQ wise, but uh, the people that I try to model a lot of stuff I do after, they are intelligent, but more than intelligent, they are receptive.
Mm.
They
Mhm.
observe the world and they just see the patterns. And that's what I'm always, like because the patterns are very simple. Getting other people to see them can be hard, but it's like the underpinnings, all the underlying patterns. If you can look past the form, because they all take different forms, it's like the same 10 things over and over and over. And so it's really the intelligence is one thing. But if you are hyper intelligent and you are not receptive, you're going to miss the obvious stuff. You're going to use all that intelligence, all that cognitive horsepower to focus on a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. So it's really it's something I work on too. It's just the receptivity. It's just making sure that I'm sitting in receivership. Um, and it's amazing what is right there in front of us if we're willing to get out of our own way and see it.
Yeah, you're right. No, absolutely. Definitely, it's about recognizing patterns and utilizing those patterns in the ways that can create the maximum benefit. I think like sometimes, in life, we just need to sort of zoom out a little bit. Like sometimes I think we're just so in the thing that we're doing that we don't notice the patterns because we're too close, or, it becomes foggy. But if we can try to zoom out and recognize what some of those patterns are, and like you said, it could just be like the same 10 things. But I think it always leads back to self-awareness as well. Like people who are highly observant are usually people who are also highly self-aware.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's in my experience, and I've met many other people that are similar. It's very difficult to be observant and self-aware, um, because so few others are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like if you have to be very careful. Another thing Dr. Jeff told me, called me one Sunday morning and he was like, "Hey, I got to tell you this. Nobody else can tell you this." Um, and it's going to sound weird, but you just have to know it. He said, "Your red kryptonite is going to be spending too much time with people below a certain like cognitive capacity." And it's a weird thing. Like, it's not something I'd be like, "Yeah, no, I got to spend time with people smarter than you." Um, like, it's not something I could say, but he must have recognized something, because I was feeling like super messed up. Like I just like super disconnected, and because I was spending I was this is my issue with my mission now is to help as many people as possible. And I've been on this kind of kick before.
Okay.
Uh, but actually spending time with a whole bunch of people is very, very hard because they're so unaware. of what is going on that it like drives me nuts.
Mhm.
And so, you got to be very careful about who you surround yourself with. Otherwise, it's not, just to be clear, it's not that I sit there and I'm like, wow, these people all suck. What happens is in your room with 1,000 people and you're the outcast, you start saying, why do I suck? Like, and so that's the battle with people that are unusually self-aware and usually tell. This is the battle that people have if they're unusual, is they
Yeah.
they start wondering what's wrong with me, because
Yeah.
everybody else is excited about the Kardashians. Why am I not excited about the Kardashians?
Oh
Should I
God.
be? So it's a
You're right. You're right. I think we end up questioning ourselves, right? Like when you're in a circle and you're feeling like you're kind of the odd man out, or like everybody's. I totally get it because I think I felt it myself, and I think it happens really like I had always known like, okay, this is not really, this is not my tribe, this is not my vibe. But it was only until what I was able to gain that self-awareness to realize like, this is why I feel that way. This is why this doesn't feel right to me, because you can be around a lot of people, but still not feel like you're around a lot of people. Like it's a feeling, right? That you have when you've met your people. But so in terms of you helping other people, I know we're kind of getting it right to the end of our interview time, but I guess I'm most curious to know, like, okay, so what's next for you?
oh well, how much time do we have? I don't have a hard cutoff. If you I don't know if
Okay,
you do.
I don't either. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm
uh
good.
so there's a few things.
Okay.
There's a few things. It's complicated, but that's how my brain is. uh so I have this is the I'm actually becoming a lineage holder, meaning uh I met the grand master of this lineage, and he's like retired. He grew up in Korea, ashram, all that stuff. Okay. And I met him and went and climbed a mountain, and we had some conversations, and he was basically like, dude, I've created 108 masters in my lifetime, which is like, so I'm a grand master, top of the lineage. It's a 4,200-year-old lineage. Like, people travel from all around the world, try to see him. And he says, I thought I was done, but I will do this one more time with you. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, what do I have to do? And so now we talk. So, he like comes at me with a sword and kicks my ass all the time. It's great. Um, so now I have to become a fifth degree black belt. I have to I have to master Chinese medicine and acupuncture and all this stuff. And then my obligation or my commitment is to create 108 more masters. So what this is removing suffering from myself and then removing suffering from others. And of those masters, hopefully some of them continue the lineage on. So it's a huge, at the time I was like, this sounds cool. It's like a 30-year commitment. To get 108 masters, you probably got to work with 2,000 people, because
Oh,
very few are going to make it through.
right.
So
Yeah.
I have to remove all the suffering from myself and master everything, and then turn around and do it. So we bought some land out in Arizona, and we actually have like a location to do this. We got a mountain and everything. So that's one. That's probably the
Oh,
weirdest one. Yeah.
actually,
Um,
beautiful.
it feels right.
Yeah.
So I have my this is a black coin. My first one was green. My next one will be gold.
Okay.
Um, so there's that. And then on the business side, I about 2 years ago I started what we call the Guardian Academy. And so part of this lineage, it's live to learn, give to earn. And the other quote that we say all the time is, you are your own guide, you are your own guard, which is like, nobody's gonna do the work for you.
Yeah.
Okay. You do the work for yourself. And so I built the Guardian Academy, which is hopefully can do this at scale. Right now it's we're about to implement this thing that's $10 a month. Because right now it's mostly business owners. Like, mostly business owners are mostly the only people that can afford the stuff that we do. And all it is, it's like, here's the core principles uh from that I get from like Grandmaster Mike. Here's And then we contemporize, we make them a little more contemporary. Um and then I bake in all of the business growth stuff, because part of You want to reach enlightenment, you got to make money. It's very expensive to find God. Um, you can't
Love that.
find God if you can't pay your bills.
Oh my gosh,
So
I love that.
it's just it's a very it's like the woo woo Taoist, but it's like, no, this is practical. Um, and what happens is you come in and there's 3 levels. I'm just gonna break it down. It's ultimately we want to get people to their purpose, which is like, what is the legacy, right? Purpose cannot be found. It's not something you like go find it, make a vision board, like you're making all that up. Purpose is an emergent property. So our thing is like, I got this from Randy Massengale. He was senior advisor to Bill Gates. He actually a partner of mine, and we talk about this all the time. Purpose emerges from intensity. Intensity, it's not like how hard you do something. It's your unique stamp that you put on something. Intensity emerges from frequency. So the process is you do the work until you've mastered it. Once you've mastered it, you start breaking the rules only the way you can. It is your unique way. Writers that break, they have their writing style. It's like horrible grammar, but it works for them. Athletes, unconventional, you've mastered the rules, and then you break them in only the way that you can, because there's whatever. From there, your purpose emerges. So our layers are like, here's all the free stuff and the cheap stuff. This is intensity. Just do the work. I give you everything for free. Do the work. And then the next layer up is, once you've mastered the work, you've done the reps, you start exploring different ways. How would you do it? And then from there, purpose can emerge. The other emergent property is full potential. So I got this from Dr. Jeff. It's like your known potential is what can be measured: height, weight, IQ, all that stuff. So you can actually reach your known potential probably on your own. You might hire a coach to help with this, but you could just work harder and probably reach very close to your known potential. Your full potential, however, is your known potential times your unknown potential. And that unknown potential, it is already in you. So it's like nobody's going to put anything in you that's not already there. So
So
stop.
you already have it.
You already have it.
Okay.
It just needs to be awakened. And
Yeah.
that typically gets awakened through exposure and proximity. It's like you go into a room and nobody even says anything to you, but just the atmosphere and it clicks, and you're like, oh my God, I could be more than this. So it's almost never like a direct teaching. It's just exposure and proximity to the right person. And the thing that awakens your unknown potential probably wasn't even said to you. They probably have no idea you were listening. It's just that. So our program's built like frequency, intensity, known. Here's all the free shit. Just do the work. Just do the fucking work. If you do the work, you'll get to a point where maybe you can afford to come hang out, and that's the proximity and exposure. So we've been building that, and it's part of it's easy. Genius Network. That part's easy. Like we have a group, and they come in. It's really getting the lower tiers of the mass market to buy into, like, what do you mean it's already in me? It's like, it is, trust me. And they're just not there yet.
Yes.
So it's,
Oh
that's
yeah.
the struggle.
And that's so much harder, right? Like it's easier to convert the people that are already go-getters and high achievers, and they go after it, and they're chasing their success and their results, and they're chasing everything. It's the people that actually don't believe in themselves. It's the people who don't think it could be them. They believe that it could happen, but they don't think it could happen for them. And so that's sort of the market that you're after.
Well, if possible,
If
we're
possible.
gonna try. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I've built now is the model is I have a bunch of brilliant people that jive. We just spend time together. And my hope is I can provide an infrastructure for it's like if you're familiar with diffusion of innovation, it's like I can't speak to the mass market. It'll piss me off and I'll piss them off. And like it's not, but there are
Okay.
bridges. It's like Laurel Portier is a client of mine, and she's like getting all famous now. And like
Mhm.
Laurel, she gets it. I can talk to her and she can turn around and reinvent it and communicate it to a little bit more of a mass market. So I'm trying to build a structure where I can just be around the people that get it and they reach somebody a little bit more mass market. And then hopefully some of their constituents take it a little bit further.
That's
The
nice.
trick is for those that might consider a similar model. Here's the trick. If you say you want to have an impact, you need so let's look in the mirror moment. The question to ask, I've done this probably 10 or 15 times with people where they go, so what do you want? I don't care. I just want to have an impact. And I say, do you care if you get credit? And
Ah,
they're like, no. Well, wait, does somebody else get credit? And then they realize how much of a battle it is. Uh,
ah,
I decided a long time ago, I don't care if I get credit. And that allows me to, um, there's probably 20, 25 people to just turn around and say the same thing I say. Uh, but if they're reaching more people, I don't care.
yes.
That's a conversation to have with yourself, though. Otherwise, you will have that dissonance.
That's so good. That's so good. And again, we go back to self-awareness. What are your pure and true intentions? And there's no judgment, but you should know your intentions. You should
Mhm.
know if you want to get credit or if you don't care, because it could also change the way that you reach that outcome that you're trying to, do you do it yourself or do you hire people who can do it for you? Because you're okay as long as they create the impact. You feel like you've achieved if they've achieved.
There's like two some huge initiative, right? You have two winners here. You could
Okay.
have the person that created the thing, but like doesn't have any money to spread it. And then Richard Branson comes along and says, hey, can I put a virgin on it? And yeah, boom. Right.
Yeah.
In that case, there's both parties were necessary. So the fact that you created it and don't care that you get credit is the reason it was able to have the impact. And the fact that Richard Branson has a shit ton of money and reach and wants all the credit is actually also one of the reasons it had an impact.
For
So,
sure.
it's like just figure out what really matters to you. No judgment. I'm not judging Richard Branson for just wanting credit. I'm not judging, mystery person who created this amazing thing. Um, because the impact doesn't happen, or it happens less often on a smaller scale, if the parties involved aren't being honest about what they want out of it.
Mm, mhm.
So if you want to have an impact, great. Decide if you want credit or not, because like to your point, it will determine your strategy, and you should make that explicit to other people. Like you should say, I don't care if I get credit, or hey, I really want to make sure I get credit, uh, just so you can find the right collaborators and partners.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's 100%. I love both of your big goals. I think that, that it's incredible. I think one is you finding a way to find fulfillment within yourself and help others along the way. I think actually for both your business side and your personal spiritual side, I think you're trying to achieve the same thing,
Mhm.
which is help yourself and then help others in both capacities.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually, it's super counterintuitive. And I know we're going way over, but
I'm okay.
uh,
I'm okay, Nick.
it's, it's super, it's kind of, it messes with your mind because I never cared about money. And people say this all the time. I promise it's true. When I don't care about money, it just comes in.
Correct.
Um, so I never cared about money when I was dealing with my own stuff.
Okay.
Okay? I care about money now
Hmm.
because it 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 increases my capacity to give to others.
The
And most
vehicle.
people have that a little bit backwards. Want money for themselves, Uh, so it's an interesting thing where like I just never cared. I'm good. Like I got a roof over my head and
Yeah.
um but yeah, now it's like the helping as many people as possible.
Mhm.
And it's not like I'm going to feed a million families and all that. I don't know. It's like we actually want to remove suffering from
Yeah.
people, and that's hard. Like it takes time and it's expensive. And so yeah, I never actually cared about money until I started thinking about what actually has to be done to truly have an impact on people in a meaningful way. And then I
Mm.
was like, yeah, that's expensive.
Mhm.
Like, so money is actually the more I get into like the world of, I guess, the spiritual woo woo Taoist, uh, it might seem super counterintuitive, but the more important money is.
Absolutely. I think when you start caring about money, it's because it serves utility. Like, you are able to impact, say, 1 million people if you have money because it is expensive. I mean, we all like, I don't know. And I think some people kind of don't want to care about money because they feel like they don't want to feel like, some people associate it with like shame, like, oh, you don't want to be rich because, money is evil or whatever programming they had from when, they were growing up. But I think like money is a vehicle to get you the results that you're looking for. And if your outcome is impact, you're going to need a lot of it. Absolutely. Because it's hard to make an impact when you don't have resources to do it, build a team to do it, create a business, a mission. It's it's near impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very difficult to do when you have big goals like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult, and it gets more and more difficult. It was easier, I'm sure, 300 years ago when it was, there was less stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, now it's hard. It's interesting. It's just kind of like uh, one thing people ask is always like, Shay Rowbottom said on a podcast or something, like, she's like, yeah, I work with Nick, and it's like he has no limits. Like he's not afraid of anything. And people say like, how are or do you have a high risk tolerance? And the answer is no. You cannot be fearful and curious at the same time. And so my curiosity just overrides pretty much everything else.
Oh,
And
good.
so
That's your superpower.
I'm
Your
just
purpose.
hopelessly curious. And to somebody from the outside looking in, it looks like I have a really high tolerance for risk, but I'm not risking anything.
Yeah.
That's because they're looking at money or whatever. It's like, I'm not. The
Because that's
biggest risk for me is not going down this rabbit hole.
right, right. Because it's not the money that you're valuing losing, right? Like it's me never pursuing it in the first place or going down that rabbit hole in the first place. That's the risk of me not knowing what's down there.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you go down, me anyway, because I'm a high quick start and I'm a high implementer. So me going down a rabbit hole is not reading about stuff. I'm like touching it. I have to do it. So I'm
Yeah.
learning. So not going down a rabbit hole is actually potentially inhibiting my development of skills, which is the only thing I care about.
Mhm.
Is I am very curious, and as long as I'm developing skills, I don't care. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so that's uh to somebody with a different personality, it looks totally crazy. But
Well, I mean, it's not crazy, it's different, but I think that it's what works for you with your skill set, with your way of thinking, and it's yielded results. So it's not crazy.
I agree.
There you go. I'm on your team. Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. And it's like, how do inventions and how do we evolve as a humanity? And like, how does that happen? It's because somebody got curious about something that didn't exist,
Mhm.
right? Like we used our imagination, we used our creativity, we used our curiosity. And had they not utilized those skills, then maybe we wouldn't have a light bulb. Like we need that. We need those people. They're just,
Yeah.
they're rare. We don't have many of those people, which is just that, you know what, you're just not the norm. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it's in fairness, not just to not encourage everybody to turn into a psycho. A fair number of people with my personality don't make it out so well, you know. So
Yeah, I mean,
it really has to be baked in. Like, I've thought about it. Maybe I should be less curious, you know, because like I have companies, there's a lot of risk, and it's like, no, that's not going to happen. So yeah, it just goes back to knowing yourself.
And I think also recognizing your patterns, like if the curiosity has not landed you anywhere where time and time, like if you're looking at your trend line and it's like fail, 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 like at the same time, like know when it's not serving you, but also know when it is serving you. I think it's to be able to discern whether or not it's making sense for that person is important.
Yeah, 100%. Science of hindsight again.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's that's me.
Oh, I love it. Nic, thank you so much for this interview. Very, very enlightening, very, very insightful. If people want to be able to get a hold of you, of your work, and see what you're up to, where can they find you?
The easiest thing is probably to go to my website.
Okay.
Uh, don't worry, there's no opt-ins or lead magnets or anything. NicPeterson.com. And it just kind of says a shorter version of everything we talked about today. And there's some navigation to just some other stuff. I have so many different like companies and stuff that I gotta like not overwhelm people.
And if they want to get your book?
It will be on my website, but you
Okay.
can also, if you go to bumpersbook.com, it'll take you straight to Amazon. I set it to the lowest price possible. My
Yes.
publisher
No
loves
barrier
it.
to entry. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
I put it down as much as Amazon would let me.
You
But
did.
if you don't want to spend the $4, you can go to freebumpersbook.com and you get a free digital copy. It's
Very good.
whatever.
That's awesome, Nic. Thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate it. And I hope to chat with you again soon.
Yeah, likewise.